Hi everyone, it's Movement, Art and Soul with Karen Sparks, and we're back again to talk about emotions. This channel is about wholeness or integration, personal spiritual synthesis, enlightenment, words like that. And I'm a counselor, artist, and a movement artist. So today we're going to continue in this Managing Emotions series. It's video 2, and a quick review from the last video was when we were talking about emotions and working with the idea around awareness. How do I manage my emotions clearly? Well, a tool we can use is by looking at our relationships, our relationship with ourselves, our relationship with others. And so our relationship with ourselves is the self-talk. What am I saying to myself? Relationship with others, how am I reacting? So we took a look at that real quick. And through awareness, just by being present in your life every time you are around people, to observe how you're responding to them will give you a really good indicator about what's going on. So then we talked a little bit about needing to dig in. So if we're starting to notice, hey, I've got a pattern with this person, or a pattern with myself, or maybe it's a pattern of avoidance, period. Maybe you say, well, geez, I don't notice myself reacting around other people, but my relationships are pretty shallow. Maybe I don't really have a depth of connection I might like to have, or I keep everything surface. And we may not react as much when we do things like that. But anyway, so getting back to the review of last time, we did mention that we need to take a look at our primary caregivers, our family, for example, and look at some patterns and energies that we picked up from our family of origin or caregivers when we were growing up, because that influences our tendency to seek out and connect with similar patterns or energies in the future. And I gave an example of narcissism, which I'll be talking about in a series about narcissism coming up when I'm done with this. Okay, so we're going to move forward a little bit more, and I want to talk about the idea around emotions on a bit of a deeper level. So if you take a look at this first picture here, all the pictures that I use are from my own personal library. So here's a swan, and you can see generally its reflection in the water. And we talked about last time too, removing distortions. Removing distortions can be difficult. For example, if I can't see that what I'm perceiving is distorted, then how am I supposed to go about fixing it? Now that is guiding us towards a tool of self-reflection. The more honest we can be with ourselves, then the more growth can happen. So if I'm honest and I can see myself as I really am in a relationship, in a dynamic, and in my life with myself on a daily basis, then I can actually begin to have choices. When my self-reflection is distorted and I can't see the dynamic that I'm in clearly, I cannot move forward from it. So that is why this is just reinforced over and over with me. And people that work closely with me as a counselor know that, or even as a movement artist teacher when I teach Kung Fu, Qigong, and yoga. Very much about, your own personal work, because when you're working towards enlightenment, wholeness, integration, you can even just call it simply personal spiritual development or evolution. We can't move forward until we see ourselves clearly and begin to get rid of the patterns that are not serving us towards that goal. So again, that's why distortion is so important. And there's two types of people, generally speaking, as the way that I was taught, looking at it simply. And the two types of people, generally speaking, are people that tend to get caught up in self-importance, or the people that tend to get caught up in self-pity. We all do a tendency of a little bit of both, maybe, but we have a preferred mode, generally speaking. So a person that gets caught in self-importance would be an example of just very difficult to take responsibility. They feel that everything that's going on is everybody else's fault, and they don't look at their role in things. So self-importance can really get in the way of a person's evolution and growth, because if I don't believe that I need to do any work, then how can I move forward? Self-pity is another trap that we can get into. And so if I feel sorry for myself, I may not get motivated to make a shift at all. If I feel so bad, I get caught up in self-pity and I think, oh, well, I just can't move forward. And I have a lot of talk around that kind of thing, then it's very difficult. And, in many ways, we can be around people that are doing things and they are to blame. So I'm not saying we're not going to be in a situation where we're really not doing anything wrong, but people are being ignorant or abusive or taking advantage of us, or they're betraying us. I mean, that is very real and that does happen. When I talk about self-importance, I mean people that have a lot of obvious issues of their own, but don't self-reflect, don't take responsibility. When they need to say sorry, they won't say sorry because they didn't do anything wrong when in fact they did. So that's what I mean. And then self-pity, of course, there are times we are a victim. One of the worst things you can tell a victim who's been victimized by a narcissist, by an abusive person, or, any kind of abusive situation, whether it's mental, emotional, subtle, whatever, a work environment, a relationship, a family environment. The worst thing you can say to somebody like that is you need to get out of this victim story. You need to, change your story. You need to stop your story. You just stop coming across like a victim. Now, on the one hand, you don't want to just perceive yourself as a victim and get stuck in self-pity for a very long period of time. Of course not. But to tell somebody who's right in the midst of something they're working through that they are aware of and they're processing, and they'll say, well, no, I don't see myself as a victim, but yeah, I've been victimized. This person did this to me. And so I have a real different approach when I work with people like that, because when somebody's been, let's say, attacked, or abused in whatever manner, they've been victimized, they've been targeted, and they were a victim and there was a perpetrator. So when we say don't get stuck there, I prefer using that kind of language instead of saying stop having a victim mentality. And maybe they do need to tell their story 10 times, 20 times, because maybe nobody has ever listened to them before. So under this umbrella of managing emotions, there's all these labels that come with these kinds of things. And I think we need to be aware that we aren't getting stuck into, I'm so self-important, I don't do anything wrong, when actually I am. Okay, so a bully, a narcissist, someone who doesn't take responsibility when they need to, is an example of self-importance. And then self-pity would be when somebody is getting stuck into a place where they feel so sorry for themselves, but it actually begins to be a mode of operating in their life for a very long period of time. And they're doing nothing about it. And that can keep either person stuck. So this is another thing about managing emotions that we have to look at is what are we doing? Are we getting caught more in self-importance? Are we getting caught more in self-pity? Are there times we're fluctuating between the two? How well do we have the ability to self-reflect? And so I'm going to mention again that when you see this next picture, the tsunami, this comes from a very popular symbol. And when I was first introduced to it, it's very interesting. This picture is a representation of Hokusai's painting called The Great Wave off Kangawa. And I really resonated with this image at that time. I think the image is what is powerful. At that time, I was experiencing some trauma too, and I had some things I had to process. There were things going on around me that were very traumatic. And so this symbol spoke to me. And that's another thing about emotions, is that when there are things beyond our control, that are going on around us, that we say, well, what can I do about it? And the answer is really nothing. I have to ride this wave. These are things happening around me. Let's say there are deaths, which in my case, there were multiple deaths going on over a period of time. And I didn't have time to recover before something else was going on that I wasn't doing. It had nothing to do with me. And it was just a number of incidences. And I felt exactly like my emotions were a big wave. And wow, there's so much going on. I had so much to work through. And I didn't have the time because it all happened so quickly. So we can feel like that sometimes, like a tsunami's coming in, crashing in on our dreams, our hopes, our aspirations, or maybe there's just so much going on that our emotions feel very overwhelming. But there are things that we definitely can do. And so, what you might say, well, what did you do at that time? Well, I do the things that I teach. My work and my life is very aligned. And I'm not saying I'm perfect. And just that example there, going through traumas of my own, experiences of my own, I apply what I know. So my life and my work is very aligned. And what did I do? I'm a movement artist. I did my Qigong, my Kung Fu, my yoga, my breathing, grounding, centering, meditating, going out into nature, doing my acupressure and Jin Shin Jutsu points, which are really great to assist with emotional balance. There's so much we can do. Drinking a lot of water, detoxing, trying to keep my diet as clear as possible, because when you're stressed, when your emotions are overwhelming, one of the keys to managing emotions is you do need to look at what you're eating, what you're drinking, how are you sleeping, and are you moving? Because all the things you can do in your lifestyle will help you to manage it. So I took extra vitamins at that time, and I did a lot of different things. And self-care, self-care. We got to look at what is going on, take a break, write the stuff down in your journal, talk to a counselor, do your movement, and do anything that can help you. I also paint. So as I said, I am a counselor, so I have tools as a counselor, and I look at what do I need to do to help myself. Number two, I'm an artist, and I work through creative processes. Creative processes, art. I love to paint, sketch, draw, and that has been very good for me on my journey, and it is a wondrous tool to help in personal spiritual growth. I use art for that. And I'm going to be doing an art series too, so I'm going to talk more about how that can happen. If you're interested in art as well, you can look into those playlists that will be coming up. So yes, there are things that we can do when we want to manage our emotions. We have all these tools, and I love that imagery of a toolbox. We have tools. Open your toolbox, say to yourself, what are these things that can help me? So on the path of wholeness and integration, enlightenment, a lot of yogis do, and I was taught this in shamanism and other counseling modalities and healing modalities that I studied, including Kung Fu, that the word itself, emotions, can be broken down to motions. In other words, that our emotions were not meant to be held in the physical body, in our psyche, in our minds, our souls, hanging on to things like, for example, sadness and grief. If we were able to feel something and allow that so deeply just to flow as it is, without the fear, without the resistance, without all the frustration around admitting the feelings, and we actually allowed them to course through the body, they would flow through, and we would be able to move on quicker. So emotions are energies in motion, simply moving through our system. We are an energy system ultimately, that over time, and this is something I've learned in Jin Shin Jutsu and shamanism and Kung Fu, is that we are multiple layered beings. So for example, at a core, you can think of energy that denses down more and more and more into layers until there's the physical. So how does that apply to managing our emotions? It's the same thing. There's an energy. Okay, something happens. I can use a concrete energy. I found out that my grandmother died. Now, I knew she was old. This was a situation where I knew she was going to die. I've had other deaths in my family that were quicker, and I felt really, wow, that impacted me because I didn't expect that. So that had happened to me too around the same time. But my grandmother, I knew she was going to die, but when I actually heard it, I just could feel that coming into my body, and I could feel the grief. And that's what I'm talking about. You will feel that. You'll feel it come in, and then it's how you work with that will help you. And our bodies also do require a certain amount of time to process things, right? So we can experience things that are just so overwhelming. They build up, and we need a bit of time to recover. So our energies being something that we can feel coming in, we can allow that to be. We need the space to allow that to be, to flow. So our emotions can, being a form of energy, if we are not allowing those to flow and we have resistance around it, and we don't want to feel that, because, really, honestly, who does want to feel deep pain and trauma all at once? So we tend to get tense around it, hold it, inner resistances of various sorts. And then, from the things that I have studied in other healing modalities like acupressure, the Kung Fu, the Qigong, the yoga, the Jin Shin Jutsu, we learned that these tensions will affect the organ flows of the body that are on another level of our being. And when these things are affected, then it begins to affect the entire circulation. That's more on a physical level, right? So then it starts to affect the physical level. And when our circulation is affected, we can read that in people's body language. We can see, for example, if you've worked with me, I mention this a lot, where people hold their shoulders up high, or there's neck tension, or you can just see people clenching their fists, doing different kinds of body postures that you can read the tension. Particularly when people are moving, you can read tension in their body better too. And so those things can contribute to illness. So managing our emotions, it helps us to be healthier. It helps us to feel freer. It helps us to move more freely. It helps us in our spiritual and personal development, our evolution, our path towards enlightenment, if that's what we're working towards. And our breath, again, is something I bring up all the time. Anytime during the day, check in with your breath, because our breath is one of the first places that we will hold when an emotion that we don't want to experience, something we don't like that's happened, occurs. And by the time most people are adults, when they aren't doing any kind of conscious work, conscious body work, conscious breath work, awareness, anything like that, begin to have very disturbed breathing patterns. And again, that can cause a host of difficulties as well. So a couple of tools for today are taking deep breaths. If you don't have a yoga practice, you can just do some deep breathing. You can place right now as I'm talking your left palm below your belly button and your right palm up around the chest area, and just feel yourself breathe deeply from the belly up through the ribs and up into the collarbone area, and breathing out from the collarbone down the ribs, down, and squeezing out the air. There are many different breathing patterns. I don't really like to do too much over the internet if I can't see how a person is breathing. So you can either see me personally, make a session with me, or you can have a yoga class, or there's things online that you can also learn where people are actually visibly showing you. Although I don't like that. I like to personally see a person, just because I can see better what their body's really doing. So deep breathing is really good, and feeling yourself grounding into the earth, centering yourself. As a movement artist, having just doing the martial arts and the Qigong and the yoga as long as I have, centering, I just have that feeling, like I just know what that means. And centering is like you're coming from the inside out. It's not that you're not present outside, but you're coming from the inside out, from the center of your being. And so you basically are the center of all things. And holding your center keeps you centered and grounding, so that you can be present in the moment and have more control over your emotions, your breath, the tension, and so on. Without being aware, without being centered, without grounding, or using your breath and your awareness, it's quite easy to get hooked into a reaction. So that's a very important piece from today. And so here's another tool from Jin Shin Jutsu, which I do teach people. And one of the things is that each one of our fingers corresponds in that particular healing and philosophical art of living. It corresponds to our organs, our emotions, and so on. So if you're feeling worried, you can hold your thumb one at a time for a couple of minutes. I tell people, try going right before bed, holding each finger start on one side of your body, hold each finger, the thumb, the index finger, the middle finger, the ring finger, the pinky, 2 to 3 minutes every night before bed. Or if you're sitting there watching TV, hold your fingers, because it's so therapeutic and so beneficial. So if I'm feeling worried, I grab my thumb. So if you grab your thumb and you wrap your fingers around it so that the top of your thumb is on your palm, then you just wrap your finger around your palm, just hold that thumb, and then you move on to the index finger. And that's good for fear. And the middle finger for anger, the ring finger for grief, and the pinky finger for pretense or trying to. I always like to explain that one. Meaning that if I am not okay with where I am at and believe in myself, I may try really hard to impress somebody, to convince somebody to be something I'm not in order to be accepted. And that leads to pretense. So I'm not really who I am, and therefore I'm trying really hard to be something I'm not. And that can stress and overburden, for example, the heart. So yeah, there's organs corresponding to that, which I can talk about on another playlist. So that's something you can do. Hold your fingers, and that might sound really simple, but as I said, when I talk a little bit more about that down the road, if you're interested, you can check out that video and find out more about, well, why does that work? Okay, so another thing to do when you want to manage your emotions is just to feel more deeply into your body. So where is my body? Are my feet on the floor? If something happens that you are extremely stressed or you've been traumatized or whatever, it's very useful to come deeply into the senses and just to say, okay, where are my feet? Can I have some water? Can I take a sip? So yeah, you can come into your body and just feel, where's my feet? Take a breath, smell something. So what you can do when a person is feeling extremely overwhelmed is to engage them somehow through their senses in order to bring them more to the present. Because it's like all of a sudden you can see it in the person's eyes. They're not really there. They're in what happened. They're not really present in the moment and not even in their body fully. So to bring them into their body can help make them something to drink, a tea, get them some water, something like that. Sometimes herbal teas can be extremely comforting. So get them to feel, to smell, to touch, talk to them so they can hear you, make them look at you if they will at that moment. So just anything to help to ground a person into the moment and check in to see what do they need. But that's for an extreme situation, which I have seen several times in my life myself, and how that can work to help someone. When we and many of us feel, overwhelming emotions we can say that's been pretty traumatic, and it doesn't have to be something extremely on one end of the scale of it, but it could be very impactful to us, and those things will help us as well. So creating a morning routine for yourself, if you're noticing, you know what, I just feel overwhelmed. A good morning routine where you do some kind of self-care to ground you for your day. I have practices that I do, and then I have a nice hot beverage. I sit down and look at what's going on for my day, wake up early enough so I can get these things done, and I feel very grounding and centering and at peace when I can have that time, and I make that time to do my morning routine. Okay, so for me, I do movements. I would suggest, even if you did something, do a short walk. A lot of people walk their dogs in the morning. Just do a stretching routine, a breathing, something. Then have a nice beverage that you like. Set your mindset up for the day. Check in with yourself. What do you need to do? What are your thoughts? What's coming up for you? How are you feeling emotionally? And just notice it. Don't do any hardcore work at that time because you're setting yourself up for the day. Just notice, oh, I feel a bit grumpy today, or oh, I still feel sad about the news I heard. I feel like I'm in grief still. But do your best to just sit with it. Just allow it to be there. Just notice it, and then ask yourself, what do I need to do today? You can also use an inspirational quote. And you could read a poem. You could pull out one of your favorite books, a philosophical book, or it could be a self-help book. And you can ask yourself, what do I need to do for self-care for myself today? This next picture here, when you see the still water, a beautiful day, nature can be so healing, and it can really help connect us to what we're feeling, and we can just let it be. Just let it be there. Get out in nature as much as you can. And you can see in this picture with the tree, part of what we need to do when managing our emotions is to develop that inner strength. We've got our roots deep into the earth where we can bring in nourishment from the connection that we have to the earth, to our understanding. What is your spirituality? What do you connect with? What's grounding for you? How do you get your nurturing? How do you get your minerals and your oxygen? How do you get your support? How do you stand in your life? How centered are you? And I'm going to end with going back to the swan and looking at the reflection and just reminding us all that the more clear we are about how we really are and how we are within ourselves and with others, that is going to give us the reflection of where we are. And when we connect, which we can talk about more in other videos, we get the idea of where to go from here, the guidance, the inner guidance. What do we connect with can help us with that. So I'm going to close up for today. You need to listen to these videos more than once, because the things that I talk about them, especially if you are getting into this for the first time or you want to go into this deeper in your life. So you can be someone who's looked at this kind of stuff. You've done personal development, maybe some spiritual development, but I can tell you from experience, and I am getting older and I've done this for a very long time, since the early 90s myself, that it is always deeper but simple things, taking simple things deeper. Listening to it again, asking yourself the questions again, always going back. I go back to the simplest tools and always get something deeper out of it. So it's really helpful for you if you haven't written notes down from listening to the video to listen to it again. Until next time, this is Karen Sparks, and I hope that these videos can bring you some guidance and some tools that can help you to manage your emotions.